How did I get into filmmaking? I was working at the CBC in the 1980s and doing radio, and it was interesting. And then I got a call from a friend who was going to the Philippines. So we're like in 1984, and at that time there's a huge people power movement in the Philippines. And he says, yeah, I need some help. Would you come with me? I'm directing this film about the people power movement against the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines. So I thought about it for 3 seconds. I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. So since I was on contract work at the CBC at that time, Canadian Broadcasting, I took some time off and I went to the Philippines and I did sound for him. And we were working in 16mm, and it was kind of an experience by doing. Previous to that, I'd done some radio documentaries, so I knew the rudiments of recording sound. So I learned how to do sound by doing it on the film. And also I got to help him carrying around his wooden tripod for the 16mm film, and the cans of film and everything else. So that was my start in filmmaking. So I didn't look back from there. I kind of got the bug at that particular point. And I'd wanted to tell stories perhaps in another way. I'd been doing writing before that, and this gave me a chance to think about telling stories in another way, in a visual way. The End of Immigration, our last film, kind of comes out of a series of films that we've done about immigrants here. As the son of an immigrant from England, stories like that have always touched me, and the fact we had a particular connection, both Marie Botti and I, with the Philippines through our connection since the early 80s. The question of migration, immigration has always been at the forefront of our thoughts and minds. We always had a connection with somewhere else, right? We had family back in England, or for me, or Hungary for her. My father always dreamed maybe about going back one day because he was the only one that came over here, but with him and my mother, and brought us over. Similar thing with Marie's parents. So migration has always been and immigration has always been one of our themes. And then I helped to set up an immigrant workers center in the Côte d'Ivoire area of Montreal. It's an area where there's a lot of migrant workers, a lot of Filipinos, South Asians, you name it. It's probably one of the most diverse areas. So we set up a center there to help newly arrived workers from the South, from the Philippines, Latin America, and others, kind of deal with the problems that they face when they come here and try to find work. Both those who come here as immigrants, those who come here as temporary migrants, and those who, for one reason or another, find themselves falling through the cracks and don't have any status. So after we'd done a series of films about migrant workers from the Philippines and so on, especially the nannies, and we'd done a series of things, in about 2007 we'd just come back from the Philippines, where we'd gone on a year's kind of semi-sabbatical. And through the door of the Immigrant Workers Center started to come these workers who we hadn't met before. We'd met the nannies coming from the Philippines. We'd met the farm workers who come here every year. But we said, what are you? And they said, oh, we're temporary workers. We're here on this new program, and we're having problems. We said, what program's this? So they said, oh, it's some temporary program. Anyway, we discovered it was a pilot project for temporary foreign workers. And there were all kinds of people doing gardening, people doing translating for video games. It was not the usual people we thought of when we think of temporary or migrant or workers who come here. So we said, Marie and I looked at each other after a while, and we started talking with people, and we said, something's going on here, something's coming in under the radar. So there's probably another film here somewhere, and we started talking, getting their stories. I'm working on several projects, always do. Because I'm never sure which one's going to work, which one the funders are going to go for, or the televisions might be interested in, and it's a wild and crazy world out there as far as funding is concerned, right? So I was helping on quite a bit with the film that we just came out here at Production Multimonde, which is Carré Rouge sur fond noir, about the student strike. So I was the executive producer on that and spent a lot of time assisting and finding ways to tell that story. So that took up quite a bit of my energies over the past year. But that's nice, it's out, it's in the cinema now, third week, and so, you know, I think it's having the impact we were hoping. I'm working personally on a project which has kind of been going on for a few years now, the usual. I say it takes about 5 years normally for me to get a project together. Maybe I'm slow, but that's my usual rate. So we've been working on this for 2 or 3 years. So I'm working with a Canadian filmmaker who lives in Holland, Dimitri Estelacropoulos. And it's about a Filipino refugee and his wife who are living in Holland. And they're forced to live in this, what we call, Dimitri and I, the Dutch penal colony. They're not allowed to leave because he, my friend, has been accused of being a terrorist. He's from the Philippines. He admits he's a liberation fighter. He admits he helped found the Communist Party of the Philippines. He admits he wants to change the social and political situation there. So does his wife. But he says, doesn't make me a terrorist. Makes me somebody who wants to change the world. But that's not my definition of a terrorist, and it's not mine either. So he's a neat guy. He's a writer. He's a poet. He's a pretty good, some would say pretty bad, others would say karaoke singer. And he's a neat guy. His wife is a wonderful woman, a militant in her own rights. She founded the underground women's movement in the Philippines, Makibaka. She was in jail, like her husband, during the Marcos dictatorship, had her last child in jail along with him. And then they were freed eventually after there was the dictatorship fell, and they went on a tour to kind of talk about their experiences. They got to Holland, and the Philippine government, in its wiseness, decided to remove their passports from them, and they've been there ever since the late 80s. So it's a film about, I call it a film about two love stories. Their love for their homeland, which has kept them in touch with their homeland for their 25 and over years of exile. And actually, they're still among the most known Filipinos in the opposition movement, despite the fact they live in this little apartment beside a canal in Utrecht in the Philippines. So it's a love story about their homeland, my friend Jose Maria Cizan says, you know, I live in a land of apples and dream of mangoes. And it's about their love story of Jose Maria Cizan and Julieta de Lima, which has kept them going through all those years of exile. So that's my latest project. Maybe if I'd have known other media forms, I would have done that. But my first film that I made was with a friend, was a documentary. Maybe if he'd made a fiction, I'd be making fiction films today. But because I really learned on the job. For me, I've worked on both fiction and documentary. I think both are powerful ways of telling stories because they're both emotional forms and so on. For one reason and another, historically and others, I fell into the documentary field, and I like that element because you're in touch with people every day. It's a people-oriented. I'm meeting people and discussing and exchanging every day. Not that you aren't good doing fiction as well, but fiction, especially for the writing phase, may be a little more individualistic. Depends on the writer. But I like that community element of documentary filmmaking. I also think it's important to tell real people's stories and to get them out and to do it in a way which is engaging and so on. I think there are some stories that can be better told in a fictional form. There are some stories that it's very difficult to tell in a documentary form because you just can't go there. For example, it's very difficult with some of the films that we've been to be in the homes, for example, with a domestic helper when things are actually happening. We shoot a little bit, but we haven't found a way to spend our lives with them every day as they're doing their domestic work in a house, for example. So documentaries where I ended up and probably where I'll stay. One of the things about making films is once you're getting financing for a certain sort of film, it is complicated to switch over to another form. And I think probably other people do fiction films well, so it'll be a compliment. And we actually have a co-production that we're working on now with the Philippines. It's an indigenous filmmaker from the Philippines, so I'll be able to vicariously live the fiction experience through him. And I've also produced a couple of very independent fiction feature films and several short fiction films as well. So it's something that I like doing, but personally my first love, I guess, now is getting in there with a documentary camera, crew, and editing it. And I love the editing phase of documentary films as well, creating on the editing table. All those things you do in fiction, I know, but that's what I know up till now. What's the link between politics and art? I don't see it as a link. I see it as one and the same thing. I can't differentiate between those things. For example, we're Monday, this weekend, well actually Friday, I got a email from the Philippines saying that this woman, Kim Chatillon-Meunier from Montreal, had been arrested as she went to leave the Philippines, purportedly for being part of a demonstration in the Philippines, for being seen at a demonstration. Actually, she observed the demonstration. So I haven't stopped since Friday afternoon, organizing, writing, Facebooking, emailing, writing texts, contacting things, arranging someone to be at the airport, etc., because we got her freed. She was imprisoned on Friday. By Sunday afternoon, Philippine time, she was released and she arrived home this morning, Montreal time, Monday morning. So she's safe and sound. She was placed on a watch list, supposedly, for having been gone and observed this rally. So I make films in the Philippines and about the Philippines, but actually I spend about 75% of my time doing what I did on the weekend, which is actually working with people and urgent things and working with migrant workers and helping to set up the Immigrant Workers Center. So the films just kind of come out of that. And I can't see any other, that's the way I am. I can't do it any other way. And I don't think either one would be enough for me. Filmmaking without that would lack something. I need that inspiration in order to do it, and so it's a way for me to give back to the social movements who feed the ideas and agree to sit in front of the camera and share things with me and Marie. What do I think of the state of documentary distribution in Canada right now? It's pretty shitty. Not that it was ever bright, but there was, take the television for example, that's the windows are closing there very, very quickly, and television was one of the main funders of documentary, especially social political documentaries like we do, which kind of are risk-taking. They take forever to make. You have to have people who are like you, are willing to take huge risks and never know quite what they're going to get at the end of the process, which may take several years. That takes a special kind of person. It takes money, money which is disappearing as the governments cut back public funding, not only in our hospitals and schools, but also in filmmaking as well. We can see the cutbacks and the impact of that at the NFB and INIS and various other places. So that the production end is difficult and the distribution end is difficult. There's not much money put into documentary distribution. It's all hard slogging, getting your film out there, getting people to know it. Of course, the film has to do its own work. It has to be a good film and grab an audience as well. The television, so therefore the television is disappearing. The new medias are coming up, and they provide a great place to show your work, but it's not sufficient to live on yet. Not in Canada, not in Quebec at least. I don't know, we'll have to see with crowdfunding and various other things whether that will, but I'm seeing the amounts of about 20,000, 25,000, you're pretty good if you can get that, it's okay, but it doesn't keep a documentary film crew going for 5 years for sure. And so the distribution end, we have a distribution section of our company called Diffusion Multimonde. And I think what we try to do is we sell our films in the same way that we make our films. We engage the communities linked to the film in the distribution of our films. And I think that's the future as well. I think that's similar to crowdfunding in a way. You're essentially looking for people who want to watch your works and want to see your films. The American control of the cinemas, the domination it's overwhelming. It's very hard to compete with the millions of dollars put into the budgets and so on. The writers in the newspapers and various other things only have so much time to write about the films, and but it's shitty, but it's not hopeless, because we have to search and find the audience which is hungry for those films, and we know people are hungry for those films. We see things like Cinema Politica, we see even our films, people come out all the time, they're engaged, they want to talk. There's not the investigative journalism, quote unquote, that used to be in many of the newspapers or on the TVs or elsewhere. It's kind of the Twitter style reportage today, short and sweet, and that's important, and there's a place for that, but going into depth in a subject and finding it and really, diving into the subject for years if you can, people are hungry for that, and we see that when we go out. So if we can let people know that our films exist and find a place to show them and get a little money back so that we can cover our bills, I think we can do it. That's our job. It's shitty, but we have to learn how to live in the system that we live in, and in the political life that we live in and circumstances, and find a way to engage and meet our audience. What do I think about the work Cinema Politica is doing? It's great. I think they struck the nail right on the head, right at the right time. It's the fact people are hungry to watch documentaries that say something to them, that help them organize, mobilize, change the world, to use a phrase which is perhaps becoming overused, but still accurate. I don't want to change the world only. I want to make sure it's a much better world, not just change it in any way, because as a kind of a communist, someone who believes in socialism, and that's the world that I see. It's not just any world, right? So yeah, that's the way I'd like things to head, and I hope we'll be going in that direction, and Cinema Politica is part of that, I mean, to see the 400, 500, 600, 800 people that pile into the cinema here in Montreal, and then all the little babies that they've created, all over Canada and even elsewhere, little and not so little actually, Cinema Politica is in other places, other schools and so on. Obviously you, they did the right thing, and I'm really happy that they're there. They're great people. They choose good films. There's discussion after them, which is key. I mean, why go to a cinema and then just leave after? I mean, you want to talk with people and exchange. You just had your vision of the world changed. The least you want to do is kind of share that with somebody and try to deepen your knowledge. So all of those things work. And hey, it's free. So can't get much better than that. And of course they've raised funds and they've done things in order to keep it free. So I think that's super, and they give things back to the filmmakers. They do pay for their films and give something back. So hey, I was really happy to have our film shown there, and I love going there and watching films.